Welcome to CFTC Talks. I'm your host, Andy Bush. Just a quick reminder, as we do every week, there's a disclaimer at the end of the show that's important for you to hear. Before we get to the show, I just want to let you know if you want to hear more podcasts, you can go to our website, cftc.gov, and click on the podcast button. Or you can find us on iTunes by searching for CFTC Talks on your podcast app. By the way, we're on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and Libsyn, so you can find us there by doing exactly the same thing. And hit subscribe if you want to get it every week. Okay, on to the show. Today, we're returning to the core of the agency, agriculture. As a matter of fact, we want to get to the cutting edge of agriculture by looking into how one leading university is educating future leaders and future farmers. Today, we welcome Dr. John Floros, the Dean of Kansas State University's College of Agriculture and Director of KSU's Research and Extension. Dr. Floros, welcome to CFTC Talks.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture is no longer some slow-moving sector of the economy, far from it. And from what I've seen, Dr. Floros, it's really on the cutting edge of technology. From driverless tractors to drones to data science, ag is sophisticated and challenging. So before we get to the college, help provide some context for our audience. What has changed over the last 5 years to really drive the innovations and the pace of this that you're seeing in agriculture?
Well, it's agriculture, like I said, it's not what it used to be. It's now a very sophisticated business. It's still the largest industry in the world. When you look at global sizes, we have to provide food for 7.3 billion people, and it continues to grow.
Right.
You can't do that unless you're very, very sophisticated. The amount of land that we have, it hasn't grown. The amount of energy we have, it hasn't grown. The amount of people that work in the farm has not grown. We're doing everything much, much more efficiently, and we're doing it with science, technology, with applying all the different sophisticated tools that we have out there. And that is what has changed. Most people still think that agriculture is just cows and plows. You know, you go out in the field, but that's not what it is. It's a very sophisticated business that if you don't understand, you make one small mistake, you can quickly get out of business.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge of it, right? And especially since agriculture prices have been down for some time, really since about 2014, it's really put added pressure on the farmers and the producers to increase yields, to find ways to be more efficient.
Correct. For the last 2-3 years, prices have come down. Commodities are not having the strength they used to have. And because of that, it's even more important to truly understand the business and its complexity and to really try to weather this storm, because it's a storm and we're going to get through it and we're going to come out on the other side. I mean, the last time this happened, it was almost 30 some years ago in the 80s. We're going through this again now, but we'll come out of it stronger, I think.
Well, you got a tough job because you got to help these guys, the future farmers of America, figure this stuff out. And I love the College of Agriculture at K-State because it's got like 16 undergraduate majors, 10 graduate majors, and you've got over 3,000 undergraduate and graduate students there. And ladies and gentlemen, a 98% career placement. That is pretty awesome. So Dr. Floros, obviously the focus is ag, but what's the core mission of the college?
Right. And so, as you said, 98% placement, and we joke about the other 2% that they don't find jobs. It's because they really are not looking. If they were looking, we can actually place twice or 3 times, in some cases, for some of our majors, 5 times as many students as we produce. The shortage is really, really mind-boggling, but I mean, if you look at the data that comes out of USDA for the years between 2015 and 2020, for all food and agricultural science-based jobs, we would have needed somewhere in 65 to 66,000. Well, all of us together, not just K-State, but all the agricultural schools throughout the country, we're only producing about 36,000.
Holy cow! Sorry, that is amazing. That is quite a mismatch.
It is, and so the industry is forced to look for people from other areas. I mean, if they can't get a food scientist, for example, they're going to go get a biologist or a chemist or a chemical engineer. If they're looking for an ag economist and they can't find them, they may go get a finance guy somewhere. So the bottom line is we're producing as many students as we can, but we're not producing enough. And the other part that it's really interesting, for your audience is there's data to show today that the kids we're producing that will come out of a 4-year degree, they will change professions, not jobs, professions, on average 7 times in their working career. So over the next 35 to 40 years, they will change professions 7 times. How do you prepare a 20-year-old to change professions 7 times in their lifetime? That's what we're doing, and we're doing a damn good job of it. It's something that our faculty are concentrating. It's something that we have designed curricula around, and it's something that really works well because we work very closely with the industry. We work very closely with the people that will hire those students, next year or 2 years from now.
That's great, and I think that's so critical. So following up on that, because there's a lot going on in the ag space, like what are the College of Agriculture's overall priorities? It sounded like you ticked off a few there, but if you wouldn't mind going in and filling in the blanks a little bit.
Sure. So, I mean, we're a very large college, as you mentioned. We have about 3,300 to 3,400 students, lots of different majors and minors. But really, some of the priorities we have, they pertain directly to the biggest part of Kansas's economy. So we grow a lot of livestock. We produce a lot of beef. So we have the country's largest animal science department, for example. And we work very closely with our vet school, and we train a lot of people to go out in the livestock industry and really help that industry become better, more efficient, more effective, and get those meat products out to the market. Priority number 2 is a lot of the large crops that we're producing right here in the Midwest, starting with wheat. We're the wheat state, starting with sorghum, but we also do some work with corn and soybeans and some of the other very large crops that actually feed the planet. Priority number 3 that we have is really because we have some serious issues with water. We do a lot of really interesting work with water, from very basic water science related aspects to the very applied to irrigation to how do we do crop rotation. So we understand a lot of the water issues, from quantity to quality to everything else. The final thing that we have, actually, it's two different things. One has to do with how do you take raw materials from the farm or the ranch and translate that into final products that people would want to buy and pay a good price for it, and it's good for them. And how do we improve the food safety of our food system? So those are some of the things that we're working very closely with our industry and all of our partners to train students, to do research and innovate in those areas, and to really take all that knowledge that we have and translate it into things and products that people can use right now. So we extend that knowledge out to the people that can use it.
Well, part of what you're doing to get that placement level so high must be something pretty positive with the interaction that you have with the private sector. Maybe just go through a couple of the things that you're doing on that front.
Well, we work very closely with the private sector, from small companies to mid-sized companies to large companies. We have a lot of people that come on campus. We have a lot of our students that go to those companies. We try to give our students hands-on experience out there in the real world. And in many cases, our students have 2 and 3 and 4 different such experiences throughout their 4 or 5 years as a student here at K-State. So they do internships, they do summer jobs, they do research projects, they're part of teams that compete with other teams, a lot of different activities that those kids are getting through. And they get to understand what is it really an agronomist will do in the future. So if they want to learn, they go over and they work shoulder to shoulder with an agronomist that has done this for the last 30 years. And they come back and they understand a lot better what it means to study agronomy at that level. Or, if somebody wants to be an ag economist and wants to work in risk management, for example. Well, we have tremendous ability to put those kids with people out in industry that can actually train them in certain areas. And then when they come back, they are much, much better students. And the other part that we do very closely with our partners in industry is to work to resolve a lot of the issues that they have. And so our faculty work very closely with scientists, economists, engineers in the private sector to really address some of the problems and the issues and product-related components and issues that the industry has. It's something that we've done for a long time now, and right now we're at the point where we are now is to create longer-term partnerships, long-term relationships with those companies, so that we both benefit. They benefit, and we benefit, and our students benefit.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for the application of what you're teaching them in the classroom, obviously, to walk out literally in the field and learn. I think that's just so critical, because I remember when I was going to graduate school, we were always like, well, how does this apply to the real world, right? And so I think that's what's so, it's so important for what you do. And I'm sure probably now more than ever, and I don't know, I haven't looked at your curriculum, but you probably do a lot of stuff with data and data science more than you ever did before.
Oh, absolutely. Data is core to pretty much everything we do. I mean, imagine trying to irrigate a field without knowing how much water to put down.
Right.
Or imagine, trying to harvest things when they're not ready. And we have so many sensors, we have so much automation, we have so much data that we're collecting on a daily basis, on a minute basis, that a lot of our students will have to understand how to handle that data, how to collect it, how to analyze it, and how to make decisions based on that data.
And how to code, and how to use computer science,
exactly.
SQL, Apache Spark, all those kind of fun things, right?
I mean, we're working very closely with many of the data automation and the computer-based companies out there, including IBM and a bunch of others. So yes, a lot of our students are exposed to those kinds of activities.
That's great. Well, speaking of which, how about a couple of success stories? Maybe just a couple for our audience.
So, there's a lot of things that we do internationally as well. And one of the questions a lot of times come to me is, why are you doing all this international work? Well, a lot of the things that we do internationally, they actually benefit our own people right here in Kansas, in the U.S., our own companies. A quick example. You probably know that Kansas is the number one production state in terms of sorghum. This is, we use it here primarily as feed, but the rest of the world actually uses it as human food as well. So we have a very large effort, an international effort that's funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development. So about $25 million worth of research and outreach that we do in Africa and a few other places. Well, the last 2 years, we've been testing thousands of different sorghum varieties in Ethiopia, for example, a country that is, decades ahead of us in terms of drought and climate change. And if we find something that's good for them over there in Ethiopia, chances are, actually, this is not a chance. It's a certainty that it will be good for us, for our farmers right here in Kansas.
Wow.
So while we're helping others out there, we're bringing those results back to help our own farmers. On top of that, because of that kind of work, now we're working with a company very closely to develop food products for the American market, sorghum-based food products for people, where up until recently, sorghum was only used for feed and cattle feeding.
Yeah, so, that's a note that I just wrote down. Sorghum is food in the rest of the world, but not here in the U.S. I just picked up on that right away. That's interesting.
So, but we're changing that, right? So we're going to change the varieties. We're going to change the way we look at it, and a very large private company is now investing in our programs so that we can work with them to create sorghum-based products for the American market.
That's great. Well, obviously, that's just amazing research. I mean, that's what we should be doing, is helping other people, right? As you reach out to Ethiopia, because eventually it comes back to us, but it's also a really good thing to do overall. So in that area of research and interest in research, how does the college drive that? How does it drive interest in research? And really, what are the top 3 areas that you see that the college is focusing on?
So a lot of our research is funded through federal grants. Much of it comes from USDA, obviously the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but we have a lot of other funding agencies that we work with from NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to NSF, the National Science Foundation, to the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense. There's a lot of federal agencies that need a lot of help when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to food.
Right.
So this is, in essence, who, in many occasions, who drives our research agenda, the federal agencies. But a lot of the things that we do because they're good for Kansas. You know, when we hire faculty, we hire them because eventually they will help the farmers, the ranchers, the food and agricultural industry right here in Kansas, and maybe beyond Kansas. Obviously, it doesn't stop at the border. So one of the things that we do is, we strategize and we look forward and we try to figure out what are some of the major issues, major challenges that we're facing here in Kansas, in the U.S., and the world for that matter, when it comes to this very complex food and agricultural system. So a lot of the things that we find when we do that pertain to some of the work that we do right now. I mentioned,
and they're kind of universal as well. I mean, I don't want anybody to walk away and think, oh, they only do Kansas stuff, but it's really universal. I mean, you were talking about water and other issues before, and I think that's what it has applications beyond Kansas, obviously.
Exactly. I mean, we're working feverishly, for example, to develop new varieties for our major crops, from wheat to sorghum to other crops, rice and so on and so forth. Well, that takes a lot of very basic science. It takes a lot of genetics and genomics and phenomics and a lot of the things that if we didn't have the expertise and the ability to do, we would still have varieties that produce half the yield that are producing today.
Wow.
Or they don't have the resistance to diseases that they have today. Or they don't have the resistance to drought conditions that they have today. Well, just by doing that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have really secured your future, because those diseases that we talked about before, the viruses and the bacteria and everything else, they continue to change all the time. They evolve. So we need to keep ahead of them. If we don't, pretty soon we're going to have some major, major issues with plant diseases, with animal diseases, and so on and so forth. A good example of what's happening with our citrus production in Florida and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. There are diseases right now that we're very close to the edge. If we don't take the step to be ahead of them, they will destroy large parts of our agricultural production. And if that production that gets destroyed is one of those major crops, the corn, the soybeans, the wheat, the rice, a lot of people will suffer.
Yeah, if that happened, then prices would go up, and the people that can't afford it are going to be negatively impacted the most, obviously. And so That's the value proposition of the work that you're doing. I mean, it really matters. Middle income, lower income, those are the people that spend the majority of their incomes on food, or a higher majority of it, a higher percentage of it. So I think that's pretty interesting, to say the least. And of course, as soon as you started talking about Florida, because I've spent a lot of time looking at the hurricane and how it wiped out so much of the citrus crop down there. And then I started reading about some of the problems that they have besides, bad weather. It really gets complicated.
Well, the major problem they have right now is what we call the greening. This is a disease that, you look at the orange or the lemon or the citrus fruit and it looks perfectly fine, but you open it up and there's nothing inside to eat.
Wow. Huh. Well, that's why they need people like you, Dr. Floros. Yeah. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, since I'm already pumping you up. I don't want to do too much of that, but I really appreciate you being on the show today. But let's talk about the K-State Center for Risk Management, Education, and Research. Well, what's the goal for this center?
So this idea started about 5 years ago or so. One of our faculty and the department head came to me and they said, we have this great idea to really do something collaboratively with other disciplines, because risk is everywhere. We understand part of it, but they may understand the other parts of it. Can we do something about this? And this is how the center was really born. We found some support for that center. And really right now, if you look at the activities of the center, It really is made out of three different colleges. So we have, as agriculture, obviously we have a big part of it, but we also have the College of Business that contributes. We also have the College of Engineering.
Right.
So these are the three major colleges that contribute to really put that center together. But we get students from across the board. I mean, we have students from psychology. We have students from mathematics or statistics. But what the whole idea is to put students through this program, which is about a year and a half, and try to get them to understand everything about risk. How do you measure it? How do you manage it? How do you minimize it? What does it mean to have risk? And these are risks from a lot of different perspectives, obviously, but includes, agricultural risks and commodities and safety risks and all sorts of other things. But the idea is that to bring all these different students together from engineering, from business, from agriculture, from sciences, from, humanities, and have them work on the same problem. And what happens when you bring all these different students together, they become extremely creative. They become, they learn from each other. And what we give them is really real problems that have come to us from industry, from the real world. And so the faculty kind of guides them, but they do all the work. And they also go out and they talk with CEOs, they talk with leaders out in industry. They work with the people that already have experience. And by the time they finish, they're so complete that, again, we can't produce enough of those students.
Wow, real world, real time problem solving. That's awesome. Well, and to that end, you're talking to my heart here when you're talking about risk, because I work at an agency that obviously we're very concerned about managing risk. As a matter of fact, I know I'm really excited to come out to, obviously, Kansas City on April 5th and 6th for the first of its kind K-State and CFTC joint conference, of which you're speaking at, which is great. But for our listeners, tell us a little bit about the conference and what you hope people will learn there.
So this conference is really a product of, part of our mission, really. I mean, our mission has three parts. One is to educate our students and train the next leadership and the next workforce for the industry. The second is to really do research and really innovate and figure out answers to the biggest problems that are facing the industry and the world. The third is really to take all this new information and educate the people right now and give them the tools they need right now. That's the third component. That's what that conference is designed to do, to take whatever new ideas and things we have within academia. And this is not just K-State. We will have people from a lot of different universities speaking there. But take the latest thought process, the latest ideas, the latest solutions, and put it in front to the people that can use them right now. So we're looking at this particular conference. It will try to determine, for example, the magnitude of risk that's present in our markets. The role that futures and options and insurance products play in managing that risk, and then leading the discussion that assesses new designs for risk management tools and how do we become more effective in our agricultural markets, and how do we really handle this immense structural change that's happening right now in agriculture and the food system. Those are some of the things that I think that will be covered. The types, the magnitudes of risk that are associated with risk instruments, the effectiveness of those instruments in the past, and how they can change to really deal with today's issues. How do we mitigate risk?
How to look out for fraud and manipulation and those kind of things too, because
exactly,
that's very
helpful. Looking forward rather than backwards, because the things that are coming down the pike will be very different than what we experienced in the past.
That is for sure. In an era of Bitcoin and virtual currencies, that now more than ever, right?
Absolutely.
It really. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I was just looking at last week. This email came from USDA. Basically highlighting a publication that came out of Iowa State University that finds very significant evidence that the Russians are meddling with information about our food system.
Wow.
From GMOs and everything else. So just, one little change in social media can really have a huge effect on risks and how people think about the food system and what they do about certain things. So the risks today are very different than 5 or 10 years ago, and it will be different again 5 to 10 years from now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, well, by the way, for those of you who want to attend out there, you can find more information by searching for KSU 2018 Agricultural Commodity Futures Conference, which should take you to the KSU Risk Management website, or you can go on CFTC.gov and search for the conference there. All right, Dr. Floros, before I let you go, what do you see, looking in your crystal ball a little bit, but what do you see are the top 3 challenges for agriculture in 2018?
Wow, that's tough. We have so many.
Well, you just mentioned some of it. I hadn't even heard of that, but of course that makes sense perfectly. I mean, you can imagine what problems can come up on fake news, right? I mean, that's dangerous stuff. But well, from where you sit.
The first thing is obviously, I mean, we're in a pretty low spot right now in the agriculture economy in the U.S., and I think that's going to continue to be one of the biggest issues for 18 and probably beyond. We're going to have to really pay attention to global markets, to commodity prices, the trade and how we deal with that. So to me, that's one of the major issues we're facing right now, and we'll continue to face for the next few years. But there's a couple of other things I think that your audience needs to also know. I mean, workforce issues is it's a very serious problem, and it's a serious problem from the bottom up and from the top down. I mean, I mentioned earlier that the lack of trained people out there for the system. We produce maybe 60% of the people that the food and agricultural industry actually needs in this country.
Wow.
So to me, that workforce training and producing the right amount of people to really work in industry, it's a serious issue, and it continues to be. Unless we really change the capacity of our colleges of agriculture across the country, we're not going to be able to resolve that. And the final thing is, we talked about research and innovation earlier. The investment we're putting into agricultural research in this country has really gone down over the last several years, actually several decades, to the point where, several other nations now have surpassed our capability and our capacity. And we're still leading the world when it comes to, who has the best and most sophisticated food and agricultural system. But I'm afraid if we don't continue to invest in research, soon that dominance will not be there. I mean, the Chinese are investing huge amounts of money into research for food and agriculture, and I would like to see something happening in that respect as well.
Dr. John Floros from Kansas State University, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, that's a wrap for CFTC Talks this week. But before we say goodbye, I just wanted to let you know we have a simple way for you to communicate with us. You can send your ideas for future shows and feedbacks, criticisms, suggestions to podcasts@cftc.gov. That's podcast, podcasts, @cftc.gov. Now, you can already leave comments on many of the outlets that the show appears on, but, we thought we'd make it easier for you to connect with us on the show. And if you have time, drop us an idea or comment or suggestion. And you know what? If we use it, we'll give you a shout out on the show. So that'll be a little bit of fun. And thanks. Hey, we'll be back next week with another guest on our quest to learn about the markets we watch. I'm Andy Bush. Thanks for listening. This has been CFTC Talks. But wait, we're not done yet. It's time for a disclaimer. The CFTC is providing this information as a public service, and it is neither a legal interpretation nor a statement of CFTC policy. Reference to any specific product, service, trademark, manufacturer, or service provider does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by the CFTC. The CFTC is not liable to any consumer or any third party for any direct, indirect, incidental, consequential, special, or exemplary damages or lost profit related to the use of the information provided or referenced referenced in this podcast. Selection of guests on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of any particular individual or entity. Many individuals and entities provide similar services to those of the guests. The views and opinions expressed by the guests in the podcast are their own and not specifically endorsed by the CFTC. Moreover, the information provided in this podcast should not be construed as investment advice. Consumers should rely on their own inquiries as to accuracy and relevance of the information incorporated or referenced in this podcast and assume the entire risk related to its use. The CFTC is providing its interpretation of market trends solely to inform the public of a framework for projecting possible outcomes under different scenarios. If you have any questions concerning the meaning or application of a particular law or rule administered by the CFTC, please consult an attorney.